Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. My name is Fonda Koxx. I am a drag queen and non-binary artist and activist who currently lives in New York City. And I am so blessed and fortunate to get to call Bonnie Violet, the organizer of this Drag and Spirituality Summit, a very personal friend and part of my community. I want to first say that it is a privilege to get to share a piece of my journey with all of you as a community. And I secondly want to say, I wish I was in San Francisco in person for this summit, but unfortunately, due to health reasons, I've had to stay in New York City. But I'm very, very honored to be here. And welcome to Over the Rainbow from Shame to Pride. I'm professionally a mental health advocate. So I work with Eating Recovery Center and Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center, who are part of the sponsors for this keynote, to make sure that LGBTQ plus folks everywhere have access and know about so many of the services that are available to them, both at ERC and Pathlight, but with our numerous nonprofit organizations all over the country. You can go to Eating Recovery Center's website and you can search for our LGBTQ plus resource page, where there you will find free support groups, as well as links to our numerous nonprofit partners who have support groups of their own for general mental health, eating disorders, gender affirming care, and so much more. And now that that's out of the way, I want to say again, my name is Fonda Koxx. I am a drag queen in New York City, and this is what it means for me to move from shame to pride. So we live in a world, we live in a culture, we live in a society that tells each and every one of us that our bodies are a currency, that our bodies, what they look like, how they move through the world, how they express gender, everything from socioeconomic status, race, and so much more is the currency to which we have to navigate safety, belonging, community, and our ability to embody and exist within our authentic self. I grew up in South Texas. I am the second of 6 children in a Mexican, Catholic, conservative, Republican South Texas family. So it is very easy for me to say that I am not the ideal manifestation of a child in that family. And growing up, I felt that there were so many things about me that made me different, that made me what I have come to call terminally unique. And I say terminally because these differences were not celebrated. These differences were not encouraged, uplifted. I was not allowed to explore them. They were oftentimes met with embarrassment, discouragement, punishment, and shame. And what I have learned in my healing journey, and what I have learned in learning to embrace my authentic self, in getting to build community by embracing my authentic self, is that my story is not unique. And yet, so often these stories go unspoken because of shame. Shame is that feeling that who I am is flawed, that I am the mistake, that I am broken, that I am damaged. And growing up in the early 90s, I feel so many of my peers, so many of my queer siblings, we were often met with these messages of shame. Quiet down, fit in, conform, or face the consequences. And I learned from a very young age to hide what I was thinking and what I was feeling, especially from the people closest to me, because I was so afraid of losing them. And at that age, I lacked the ability to communicate and articulate that these were the feelings that I was having almost every moment of every day. Something is wrong with me. Something is broken. Something is flawed. I grew up in a very religious home. So religion was very much a central fixture of my everyday life. We were very Catholic. We were the type of Catholics that even went to church on the holy days of obligation. And if you know what I just said, you were that kind of Catholic too, and I feel you. We weren't just the Christmas and Easter Catholics. We were every Sunday and then that random Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, where some saint did something or God performed some crazy miracle and we had to go to church those days too. And I remember sitting in that pew thinking, when I became aware that what I was experiencing, these differences had to do with gender, had to do with puberty and sexuality, that I was one of those people that the news media was talking about, that the preachers and the pastors and the politicians were talking about, that these feelings that I was having were the same feelings that were being expressed by these people to be an abomination, to be sinful, to be negative, for a lighter term, that I was this person. I internalized those messages. And that was my journey into the closet. So we just celebrated National Coming Out Day. So I want to say to everyone here, happy National Coming Out Day, however you identify and wherever you are in that journey. I just want you to know that I have learned and I am part of an amazing community of people that love you, embrace you, and see you. And even though right now we are in some very crazy times and there's still a lot of those same messages, I feel so much better knowing that things like this exist, that there are places like this for us to come to be celebrated and be loved, and most importantly, get this message that we are lovable and that we matter. And so growing up, I didn't have those messages to counteract all of the shame and all of the negativity that I was hearing from everyone around me. And so I began to hate myself. I began to dislike and even fear the person that I was sitting in those church pews on Sunday. I remember thinking, like, what is the point of trying to be good enough when ultimately, when I get to the end of my life, whenever that is, God will say, you were queer and I want nothing to do with you. And so I began building a life of make-believe. And it was very painful. This fear of who I was, this shame around who I was, this inability to communicate these very heavy emotions that I was experiencing led me down a very dark road of eating disorders, trying to starve and numb the pain of being a queer person away. Many, many, many nights of praying to God to fix me, to change me, to help me make sense in the world. What I didn't know then that I know now is I just for once wanted to know what it felt like to be okay being in my skin. And that was an impossible reality for someone like me in the environment that I was in. And that space, that pain created a separation from myself. And I threw that person that I thought was undesirable, unwanted, into a closet. And I did everything I could to try to forget that that part of me existed. I did what I think most of us do. I joined sports. I began to change how I talked. I began to disengage from my peers. I remember thinking every second of every day that I had to be aware of how I was being perceived in the world. And I was on pins and needles all of the time. And I, again, had no idea that a world like this was even possible, that a reality where I could be here in front of you today expressing all of the parts of myself that I once feared and hated and was taught to fear and reject would be celebrated, would be embraced, that I would feel comfortable celebrating them, that I would feel comfortable embracing them. And I do believe truly that that is a miracle. And so I did everything I could to run away from the fact that I was a queer person. I did everything that I could to forget that I was a queer person until one day the weight and pain of putting on that mask became unbearable and I cracked open. I guess you could say I swung the closet door open, but I didn't leave it. And I think that's a very important step for a lot of us in the queer community to acknowledge. I opened that closet door, but I was terrified of the world on the other side. I was able to say out loud that I was gay, but I was deeply ashamed and afraid of what that would mean for me and my life. I was terrified of queer people, and I had spent my whole life not knowing how to be authentic. So the idea that I could build authentic relationships, that I would know who I was as soon as I stepped across the threshold of the closet door is not possible. And I carried so much shame around that. My first experiences of the queer community, like I think for most of us, was in nightlife. I began going out. I made some queer friends. And I remember hearing the words pride, and it felt so unachievable for me. I felt like an imposter in my own skin because I was still so deeply afraid and ashamed of the queer person that I was. And I was terrified to explore that. What I do know at the time is that I really wanted to live. I just didn't know how. I had never developed the tools that I would need as the queer person to begin trying to build an authentic life. I wasn't given the space or the permission or the language to grieve and mourn the life that I thought I needed to live as a young, straight, Catholic Latino. I wasn't given permission or space to grieve the family that wanted nothing to do with me the moment I decided to own who I was and to say those words out loud. There were so many things that I didn't know how to do or that I needed to do. And yet there was this word pride, and it stung my skin, and it made me feel so much smaller in a way. What I am so grateful for, immensely grateful for, and I do think is a miracle, is that I knew I wanted to get better. And I knew that I needed to begin dealing with the psychological pain that I was in with my eating disorder and that I was in with my addictions. And when I began saying out loud that I needed help, I started finding myself stumbling into spaces and community with other queer people like this one today, sharing the things that I'm talking about now, saying out loud that they felt the way that I did in my skin, that they felt like there was no place for them in this world to be exactly who they are, that there wasn't a loving force in the universe that some call God that has chosen them and loved them the same every moment of every day. And in those spaces, I really began to hear people communicate what shame sounded like, what shame looked like. And I realized, oh, this is why I have such a hard time understanding pride, because I had spent my whole life marinating in secrecy and shame. And how can you build a life worth living when you believe that every tool you have is broken? How can you build a life of authenticity and love and connection and celebration when you believe that your foundation is broken? And I realized that, oh, this shame that I am carrying is not my sin. It's not my own. It is the fear of the world that did not give me a chance and was never on my side and didn't treat me like a loving human being. It did not give me the dignity of a human experience. And I was able to really begin to challenge and dismantle these belief systems in my head around God, myself, religion, the world. And I began to realize in the power of community that I stood on the shoulder of so many giants, that there were so many queer people around me currently and who had gone before me that have paid the price of my freedom with their experiences and so often their own lives. And I began to realize and accept that to be queer and to have pride means to embrace a space of gray. That so much of my pride was centered in the ability to make space and to make healing possible for myself and for other queer people. To say, hey, me too. I lost my family. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how I was going to make it to tomorrow. I didn't know what it meant to be queer. And through community and through the guidance of so many people, I've been able to really begin exploring and finding who I am. I remember, I want to share a moment with you when I really began seeing that spirituality and community with other queer people was a place of healing for me. Remember, I said that growing up, I so often prayed for the God that I believed in at the time to fix me. And when I began my sobriety and when I began my recovery journey from my eating disorder, I was told by an older queer that I had the privilege of getting to know that I should pray for God to reveal to me who I am. And I remember not listening because I was like, I don't know, that sounds very sketch. And then one day I was like, I have nothing to lose, so why don't I try? And so I did. I prayed. I said, God, please reveal to me who I am. And in that moment, I remembered that I used to pray to God all of the time to fix me. And it was very painful. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I felt this spiritual presence, this voice that said, I remember how you used to pray for me to fix you. And what I want to tell you is, you were never broken. I never needed to fix you. And I want you to look around you and realize that I answered your prayer anyway. Because rather than fix you, I changed the world so that you can finally realize the beauty of what it means to be you and to be loved and celebrated for who you are. And that is the mission that I live by today. That is my values that I live by today. What I love the most about drag and what I love the most about drag and spirituality is that it helps me to let go of certainty and rigidity and fear and to embrace experience, to embrace openness and creativity and love. And the most important thing that I've learned from drag is that all of those parts of myself that I was so scared of, with drag and with community, I get to reshape those narratives. I get to boldly and proudly display them to the world from a place of my own creation, from a place of my own authenticity, and from a place of love. And I get to still to this day experience moments where I'm scared or I'm ashamed. And now, instead of running from those moments or feeling like I need to numb those moments, I make space for them. And I say, I understand why I feel this way. I mean, there have been moments where I'm putting on my makeup and I cry because sometimes it's tears of happiness, like, I can't believe I get to do this. And sometimes they're tears because this used to be a very painful place for me. And what I love about spirituality and what I love about just learning to be authentic is neither one of those experiences is wrong. And the most beautiful thing that I've learned about pride, being proud of who I am and being proud of my community, is that I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to listen to what the world says about my body or my background or feel shame anymore about the dark places that I used to find myself in because I was so afraid of who I was. I get to look all of those experiences in the eye and I get to say, these are the things that make me valuable, not just for myself, but for others in the community. Because so many other people shared those same experiences for me. And when they did that, they were shining a light of hope that I am valid, that I matter, that who I am is the difference that is needed in the world to continue to open the world's mind, to continue to open the world's heart. And most importantly, I, like everyone else, am on a constant and continuous journey of learning who I am and what I have to share and what I have to give. And if you right now out there are really feeling the weight of all of the messaging that we're being bombarded with all of the fear and the laws, I want you to know that you are exactly what the world needs. You are exactly what is going to make a difference in this world because you are the hope for someone else. And you get to discover who that is one day at a time, just like the rest of us. The last thing I'll share in this journey of shame to pride is that none of us are ever complete. We are having a human experience, which means sometimes the lights aren't on in our heads. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's a rainy day and not a sunny day. And what I've learned from nature, being part of spirituality as my teacher, is we need those days too. We need those seasons in our lives to give us an opportunity to find introspection, to learn lessons. If it was sunshine all day, every day, everything on the planet would die. We need the washing and the nurturing and the replenishment of the rain. We need the shelter of the gray. The biggest lessons in my life are in my past. And what pride has allowed me to do, real pride, love, and openness, is to not be afraid or ashamed of where I come from anymore. So I want to thank you again for being here today and know that you are so loved, that you matter. And together, one day at a time, we are going to continue to march into a direction of more love, continuous freedom, and growth. Mwah.